What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Connected to the Web podcast, a part of my YouTube channel, the World Wide Web of Lending. Specifically in this podcast, we don't do a whole lot of talking about lending. It's about our community, about the people that are in it, the businesses, but more importantly, it's about issues that connect us all. And we're taking a little different turn this time. We had a situation happen in our local community that we're going to talk about, and I have an amazing guest with me. So, Christian, welcome. Appreciate you in my podcast studio. I still don't use that word lightly. But welcome. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why you're here today?
Yeah. Thanks, Joe, for having me. It's great space, by the way.
Thanks, man.
It's awesome. Beautiful. But yeah, my name is Christian Honig. Been in this community my whole life, born and raised. Married my high school sweetheart.
Love that.
Got to raise our kids here, and we love this community, and are here to stay. So
you're a local boy. So
local boy, yeah. Been here.
I'm a transplant from Baltimore County. You're a local boy.
Yeah. Well, I was born in the city, and then my parents moved us up here about when I was 5. So
that totally counts as a local boy.
Yep.
That's awesome. So we knew each other before our recent reconnect.
Yeah.
We have sons that play for local rec lacrosse teams.
Yeah.
Wolfpack, shout out to Forest Hill Wolfpack.
That's right.
A couple years ago, our sons met. And Carson's still playing lacrosse, right?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
North Hartford High.
Okay. Oh, they're in high school, dude. This is nuts.
Crazy.
So he must have been part of that age group where they were blended because JMO is 8th graders.
Okay.
So that's, still the fact that we're having this conversation about high schoolers is nuts. Time is the greatest thief on our planet, so it's crazy. Okay, so I coach rec football. Most of you guys know that. I don't coach lacrosse. I was the guy on the sideline my first time where a yellow flag hit the field, and I'm like, hey, no one sees the flag. And an awesome dad came behind me, put his hand on my shoulder, and was like, hey, man, you're a football guy, aren't you? I turned around and goes, yeah, how'd you know? And he's like, when the defense makes the penalty, we don't stop the play. And I was like, wow. But I'm too loud to hide things. So when I say it, it's out there.
Everybody's here.
That was my first experience with lacrosse, with the Wolfpack, and then it kind of grew from there. So, but I coach with the Bel Air Terps. And unfortunately, our community had a tough reality at this point during the recording about 2 weeks ago. Young man in our community decided that to take his life. And it was a shockwave that kind of hit a lot farther than I even thought it would, outside of the immediate community, friends, family, and this young man's father is a part of the Turk community, and I won't go too in detail, but I just felt this need to talk about it. Mm-hmm. I am not an expert in the subject. I do not have any clinical background for anybody listening, but I'm a father. I'm the father of young men, and when this tragedy happened, I just did some really, really light research to understand how could this happen. And some of the statistics that I saw were overwhelming, to put it lightly. Children in general, but young boys. And I just felt this need to have a conversation with whoever was willing to listen. So as of this moment, we don't have a crazy amount of subscribers, but there are a lot of people that listen to this and go forward. And my motivation behind our conversation and having Christian here today is just to talk about this and have a conversation that is going to be uncomfortable. So I was recommended by a dear friend of mine just to say trigger warning. I don't mean that in any political sense. I mean that we're going to talk about some sensitive things today. I'm a big old sap. From what Christian says he is too. There's a chance we get a little emotional, but I think it's important to have these conversations, even in a casual sense that we are today. So, Christian, you want to share with the audience why you and I reconnected and kind of what led you here today?
Yeah. So for those that maybe aren't friends with me on Facebook, I've used my Facebook platform as a kind of a means to try to encourage people, for a number of years, but recently I lost my oldest son to suicide as well. So this topic just reemerged fresh. I lost my oldest, Cooper, at the age of 18, the beginning of the summer, June 7th. So for me, this has kind of just been one of those topics that I just can't just sit by and say, well, it's just kind of the way it is. It's um, it breaks my heart, but at the same time, as a dad, as a leader, as somebody that wants to make an impact, to use my life in a way that is impactful and a helpful way, I just can't sit by and accept
Yeah.
what's happening. And to your point, the statistics are startling
Mm.
for these what's happening in these young men's lives. And as I processed, my son's loss, just can't help but see that there's just frankly just some lies I think that have been come into agreement with.
Mm.
And somebody that struggled with some mental challenges myself, some anxiety and depression and things like that, and kind of been on the other side of it. You kind of can look back and see that
Yeah.
there's some things that you know that what you believe really matters, what you come into agreement with about who you are, what you can do, what you can't do,
Yeah.
really matters. And I'm passionate about talking about it. And we both said that day at Starbucks that if we help one person, then
Yeah.
this conversation's worth it.
Yeah. And I'm already getting chills and goosebumps. But I think one of the things you just mentioned that I want to come back to real quick, and we're probably going to do this several times, is some lies and misconceptions. And I think one of those misconceptions, which by all means, I'm not too proud. If I say something's wrong, please correct me. It's important in this space. But when somebody hears about a young person who attempted or was successful in taking their life, they assume the mental health was extreme in a certain direction or there was extremes that existed. And as we chatted, it's not always the case, that it doesn't have to be that way. And in that moment, the moment that you accept that general non-clinical statement, that means that every parent should be concerned. It's not a parent of a diagnosed child with depression. It's not a diagnosis from a clinician that makes you a risk factor only. Clearly, that would be included in the write up, so to speak, right?
Sure.
But I think the biggest thing that scared me as I was researching is the lack of consistency in why these different reasons are floating around in these young people's heads.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It's yeah. I mean, 100%. Cooper's was a amazing, amazing young man. He's my firstborn, my oldest, and just a great kid. And he really struggled during COVID. It was his freshman year in high
Oh,
school. So I think that's a kind of an X factor. This
yeah.
time of your life where you're really kind of having to face in some really difficult kind of social settings. In your freshman year, it's a pretty
Yeah.
vulnerable year
High
where
school's tough, man.
yeah, you kind of build some of those social muscles, and you kind of step into those spaces where it's like, man, what am I going to do here? Um, so for him to be in his bedroom his freshman year, I think was really really tough on him. And yeah, these quote unquote diagnoses weren't something that wasn't true for Cooper. It was
Mm.
this type of deal where he wanted to go to senior week, and we were okay with that. We kind of thought this would be a time in his life where kind of taking that step out, hanging with some buddies. We knew there was going to be a parent figure down there, so we're like, okay, this is okay.
You're
And
checking the boxes for a generally, safe environment
yeah,
to a certain point.
to a
It's
certain
uncontrolled.
yeah, and like I said, good. He's a good kid, compliant, always a respectful kid. So for us to think like
Wasn't
this,
rebellious.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So for us, that this was never even a kind of even a thought in our mind. And we
Mm.
actually were down there at the beach when we got the call for our youngest. She had her sand soccer tournament down there, so we were actually down there. And so yeah, to not to strike fear into anyone by any stretch, but I think to have these conversations,
Yeah.
to understand that this is a reality, that one, I hope our conversation can kind of start to change the conversation a little bit, and,
Yeah.
and kind of change the narrative that especially for the young men. I think if there's anything I'd want a young man, maybe 16 to 25, 15 to 25, to know is, hey, if you're going through something, it's okay to talk about it. That
Oh my gosh.
that sense of stepping into vulnerability, which
Yeah.
can feel so scary in the moment. um, I think one, it's a sign of strength, but two, that it's okay, that I don't care what it is that you're going through, that there's a real sense that somebody else is going through it, has gone through it, and it's going to be okay. Um, but I think we talked about the misconceptions or lies. I think
Yeah.
sometimes we get in that headspace where we think like there's no hope or there's no way out, and it's just not true.
Yeah, and I think for anybody listening to, once again, I've already done it twice now. You know, Christian said something really powerful, and it's about um, the misconceptions coming across as a parent, and it's we are not trying to have a conversation of fear. When you have a child who is coming of age,
Hmm.
the P word hits, the puberty word hits,
Yeah.
right? They're going through all kinds of stuff, right? Middle school is crazy. The
Yes.
educational standards start to rise. The GPA starts to become a real thing in training for high school. When you get to high school, immediately as a freshman, it's what about college? What classes do you want to take? All this stuff. And then you add on the social part of it. If there's sports involved, there's competitive pressure, which can be a galvanizing force. But there's also the reality that your child, any child in America, will be exposed to things they were not exposed to when they were younger. And if they were exposed to them younger, that's its own situation. But drugs, alcohol, women and men, relationships,
Yeah.
right? Significant others, a conversation about sexual activity.
Yeah.
These are all incredibly uncomfortable conversations. And I think as completely opposed from fear, it's about awareness that as a parent, we simply want you to have another tough conversation with your child about mental health.
Yeah.
And you just don't know that that conversation could have an impact. And we're not implying in any way that if you don't have these conversations, there's culpability. It's simply as a parent, you want to do everything you can
Yeah.
to set your child up. And when you said it's not about fear, I just immediately had this feeling like, yeah, this isn't what's going on right now. But the birthplace of fear is ignorance.
Yeah.
And the less you know about a topic, the more you're likely to fear it. And then you'll reject it and go away from it. And there are so many parents that don't talk to their kids about major issues. And it's not my job to tell them how to parent.
Yeah.
But, I appreciate you coming on this as a parent and as a member of a community that you don't want it to be in, but you're in. But the fact that you're coming here today and just having a conversation is the strength that you're showing. And I just wanted to celebrate that and thank you for that moment, man.
No, I appreciate it. And I think about my oldest girl, Mia. She's 17, and she's an inspiration to me. She's an amazing human, and to see how she's continued to carry herself and still
Yeah.
even hang out with friends that maybe are going through a tough time, and being a shoulder to lean on in those seasons. It's just amazing, and I think it's one of those, I think, life hacks that when
Great term.
when you could really start to, for lack of better words, take your eyes off of yourself and see how you could be of service
Yeah.
and add value to those around you. You get something in return, and I think that's this idea of community, that if we all kind of lean on each other and are there for each other, it's a game changer. But we have this, I think it's a blessing, but this little device here that has connected us in a lot of ways, but I think in a lot of ways has separated us. And as a parent, these are big factors, because the influence that is going on,
Mm.
to our kids and on our kids, for lack of better words, I think is significant. And we don't really understand or know all that they're looking at and all these things that they're being
Yeah.
influenced by. So you got to calculate how many hours in a day where we're actually influencing our kids directly. Um,
Yeah.
it's a big deal. And to your point of having these conversations, it's critical.
So any statistic you look up, any source, unbiased or biased, it's one of the very few things the entire country agrees on, is that cell phone can be a force for the good or the bad. And social media in itself is just such an uncharted territory as a parent. Abstinence, to use a funny word, social media abstinence is naivety at some point, because your child is going to be exposed to it in some way. You certainly can influence their appetite and their availability, but it's a part of their life, whether they like it or not, because somebody can take a video of your child and post it, and you can't necessarily do a whole lot about it. So, again, back to those uncomfortable and tough conversations inside of the cell phone use and social media conversation, there's also the effect on mental health. And not even to the extreme where the child might be exposed to suicidal thoughts, but just in isolation. As these phones and these apps can connect these children, there is also a lot of isolation. There's a lot of bullying. I know that on the female side, there's a lot of cyberbullying that females get the brunt of, but males also have our own version of that. Whereas there's this the need to project an image or a self-image that isn't necessarily true. I think both, all kids get that, but it's a little different for boys because fashion isn't something we're always a part of. Just naturally, you might grow into it in your career, but and then when you mix all this in between social pressure, educational pressure, you begin to plan your life as a teenager. There's a space there where a parent can get involved. So I wanted to ask you something that we did not talk about.
Yeah.
What was the effect, the recent effect of your children after the grief was gone? And you touched on this a minute ago with Mia. What is their effect with their platonic relationships? Do they tend to be more sensitive to their friends' needs because of what their own family's going through? Have you noticed any change? You mentioned it with me a little bit.
No, I definitely see it in Mia. Carson for sure. Mackenzie is my youngest. She is, I think, just kind of a natural leader, and she's she's somebody that she's always just sharing her, encouraging, whether it's music or things that she's listening to or things that she likes. I'll see her, again, using her device on her
Mobile
iPad.
device, right?
Yeah, but they're watching something together or sharing it. So I just love seeing that. Faith is an important part of our family and our dynamic. We believe in God, and I'd say that our faith in Jesus has been massive in this season and processing through this. So to see my three kids now grow into the young adults that they are is a blessing. And in a way, it's forged us together. Doesn't mean that everything's perfect. No, I mean my kids
Absolutely.
still, forget stuff. We're still trying to, do dishes, laundry, all the normal stuff in life.
Yeah.
But I'd say that as Kim and I, which my wife's been amazing, and this is something as a husband that you never would want your wife to have to go through, but but to see how it's really forged our family together in a way that I just pray that it just continues to just be something that we continue to fight for these young kids that are battling again these lies. And you mentioned it, Joe, that like this dynamic that kind of at an early age, like we're kind of sized up and measured by our grades, our athletics, and all these different things, and the dynamic that the cell phone and social media creates is this kind of comparison when there's really no comparison.
Yeah.
In my line of work, I love the idea of trying to sell people on their value and their worth, and really build that out for them, so they can get curious about what's the gold inside of them. That each person's 1 in 8 billion plus. There's not two of the same. So I think the moment that we start to step into that, what was my score on the field, or what was my score on the golf course, or my grade, and have that be at all a way in which we measure our worth and our value.
Oh my gosh.
We're kind of already missing the mark, right? So I think that's an important thing to just continue to build out, because there's not a ton of context for that in the day-to-day in society, because as an adult we look at cars, houses, bank accounts,
materialism,
all the stuff, when really what's really of value, and to be frank, or to be almost graphic, is like when you see a body in a casket, to realize that's not the person, that the person is actually their soul. It's actually who they are. That isn't there any longer. And it's like, oh wait, but all the while we've kind of gone day after day using these external things to kind of rate, are we good enough or aren't we good enough? And it's like
the scale.
No, you're good. Like, you're good. Your life matters before you put your feet on the floor in the morning.
It's a shame that everybody needs to have a salesman, like you mentioned, but how many children don't have that salesman, right? How many children don't have somebody helping them learn their own value? And the kids like to say one of one, and I'm getting better at this. I just learned a new term called him. Okay. You say him, right? He's him. I'm like, what did you just say? Bible him? No, HIM, Dad. He's him. Well, he's what? Never mind. So, but they use this language to describe their favorite athletes.
Yeah.
And, what I'm internalizing from what you just said is everybody's him or her.
Yeah.
Right? And they're one of one.
That's it.
And that they don't get told they are one of one enough.
Mm-hmm.
We don't as guys. Right?
Yeah.
We don't either, right?
Yeah.
But we're talking about the kids.
That's right.
But as humans, Americans, we don't get told we're one of one too much. It's too much. That little thing you held up,
Yeah.
it is contrary to that belief. It compares you a lot. I'm glad you said that because man, that can be a whole other issue. But it's a really important part of these young people's lives.
Yeah. I'll mention my young life leader in high school, this guy Trent Gladstone at Bel Air High School. He'd show up in the hallways, and I remember I was 16 and I had just gotten a terrible report card. It was awful. I struggled in school, by the way, which, again, if that's where you're trying to find your identity or your worth, like that's tough. That could be a tough go. But Trent, was a guy that kind of came into my life and was just extremely impactful. And it wasn't anything magical that he did, but we actually just talked on the phone yesterday, and he still calls me, right? Like he's still one of my best friends. And, he would just spend time with me. We'd just hang out. We'd go, he'd get his oil changed. Like, when he come with me? Yeah, of course,
sure.
Let's hang out. But, it was funny. I would come home and tell my dad, be like, hey, Dad, listen to what Trent told me. And as I've gotten older, I realized my dad was probably like, I've been telling you that for your whole life, son. Right? But just this importance of having others around us to echo what our parents are saying, because I don't know what the factors, whether it's just youthful pride or whatever, but for some reason, like your parents at some point in those teenage years are kind of like the dumbest people on the planet. It's kind of like, hey, what do you know?
We're trying to catch up. Yeah.
So, it's just funny when Trent would tell me these things, it would just land differently, and I could kind of make it my own. And I'd go home and be like, Dad, listen to what Trent said. But my dad's phenomenal, and he's like, oh, really? And it just encouraged me in it. But looking back, it just makes me laugh. And I just think back to, those days back in the day when communities maybe were a little bit tighter. No time period was perfect.
Yeah.
But I think as we kind of address this problem together as a community, I think is to realize also the value that other parents have in other kids' lives.
Oh my gosh!
And the saying that it takes a village is massive. And just to share another quick story, there's a guy, a dad on my daughter's soccer team. He told me this story. He said, when I came off of the baseball field as a high schooler, he's kind of upset after an at bat and chucked his helmet and hit one of these trash can barrels. And one of the other dads looked at him right in the runners and said, "You're better than that." And he said, and here
not a coach, it was a dad.
It was a dad.
A sideline dad.
A sideline dad. And he said it still sits with him. It still resonates with him that, that guy looked at him and said, "You're better than that." But I think, like, as parents, just to know that your voice matters, that your influence matters in other kids' lives too is an important message. I think that we need to kind of refresh and think about, because I think in some cases there's this cancel culture, this thing like, oh, I don't want to, offend somebody. But, the kids need these messages and need to be reinforced outside of the family. It's really important.
Yeah, I want to sit in that for a second because that's some deep stuff, man. You're 100% right. And that's cool that your friend still talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I kind of want to double back on something that we had brought up, like kind of low key, but it's important. I know it's a big part of your life. And just kind of re-highlight that and talk about that in this space of the mental health of our youth. Let's talk about your faith for a little bit.
Yeah.
I know that we live in a world people are very comfortable trying to point holes in other people's belief systems, and that itself is a shame. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure that there's a lot of people who, when they hear about the loss of youth, and then they hear about that family being a member of a local community of religion or church or faith, whatever word applies, that there's some judgment going on there. And, they don't have the right to judge, but they do anyway. So kind of walk me through that. And I don't want to put you back in that time, that horrible time, but you can just kind of share with me and the audience how your faith helped you get through something that we all hope we never have to deal with, but you're sitting here today, and that's proof that God had a plan. But share kind of how that the faith intertwined with the events after Coop's passing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I first say, Freedom Church, where I go, was phenomenal in supporting our family. Still has been
awesome.
And again, it's not necessarily what they did, but I think the time that they spent, just the fact that they came around our family, just
Yeah.
loved on us, and that support is still there. And
They
it's,
embrace you guys.
yeah, it's been amazing. But I think just personally, just understanding for me, the cross has never meant so much to me in that, I think that the cross of Jesus, what that means to me personally is that it's all covered, like all of the wrong that we see, it's all covered under the cross. That's what Christ died for. And for me, the fact that, you know, one, as I processed after Cooper's passing, I couldn't help but think about all the things that, Monday morning quarterback, every parenting moment that I ever did
Of
wrong,
course.
right? But just to
And it's
understand,
amplified,
it
unfortunately, in that situation.
it is, man, and it's still something that, obviously I want to learn from the past, but I think one of the aspects about the past is there's no rewind button. You can't go back. You can't redo
Amen
anything,
to that, brother.
right? So, and I think that's an important message too. For you can't go back. We can learn from it, but in the future, that's a whole nother thing. Like you can't do anything about that either, right?
Yeah.
Like so, you just kind of be present. But my faith has just provided that context. One, I think personally that I'm seen and I'm loved, that God sees me, that this isn't some like cosmic accident. I think in a lot of ways, I think it takes more faith to believe that somehow we're all here by
Yeah.
happenstance, that we all desire love, that there's this deep longing, I think, to be seen, to be loved,
Perfect.
that we all have, and it's only in the cross, I think, that in history where that answer has been, satisfied. And I get up this morning, what today's, February 12th or 13th.
13th.
Yeah, 2025. Like where'd that date come from, right? So like it's all around us. And my wife and I got to go to Europe a handful of years ago, and just to see some of the history, and
The origin story.
yeah, just to realize like my faith isn't just just it's not in a myth. It's actually rooted in history.
Yeah.
And so it definitely, when you walk through a traumatic season like this, it definitely makes you really question everything, because you really have to figure out what you want to put weight on. Like geez, in those moments,
Why?
do you turn to the bottle? Do you drink? Do you smoke? Is
Yeah,
it a
vice.
pill? Is it yeah? How are you going to cope with something as real and heavy as this? And if there's not something after this, and if this is all there is, that's kind of hopeless. But as I've kind of wrestled, and even in my younger years, I've kind of did some of this pre-work before walking through this season, which I'm super thankful. But man, I'd say to anybody that's really questioning their faith, or really how to take the next step, is, man, I'd say go all in. Put as much time and effort in there, because when you look at the materialism that we were talking about, like it's all fleeting. It's all like chasing the wind at the end of the day.
Yeah. And so before I ask this next question, I want to put a disclaimer that we share a lot of the beliefs. Our view on faith, we share. So in that shared belief, and then our friendship, I'm comfortable saying this. There are a lot of people who, when they watch this, will inside, hopefully not outside, say, if God was so great, then why'd he let that happen?
Mm.
Right. And that can be said to any horrible situation.
Yeah.
And I know in my heart what that answer is,
Mhm.
but I'd like to hear what your answer is to that, because even in those moments when people are hearing about this tragedy,
Mhm.
your son and your family's tragedy,
Yeah.
I know there are people that, for some reason in their heart, feel the need to say, well, this is just proof
Mhm.
that it's not what you think it is,
Yeah.
right? Share that with me.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts when I say that out loud? And I know you've come across that in life, like we all do, but tying that into how important faith is to your family and was in that moment,
Yeah.
knowing there are people that would use this moment to say, this is proof that what you're saying isn't even there.
Yeah. Well, first, I think this is proof that what you come into agreement with, or what you believe, matters, right? And I think the reality is what you focus on expands. And we talked about some of these lies or misconceptions, and I think, as I've kind of done some research on this mental health thing, is sometimes we get into this space where, and it's crazy, but some of the answer to all of our problems is that I would just be better off not here. right? So that's not answering your question, but I think again, just to highlight what we believe and what we come into agreement with matters.
I know where you're going with this.
About who
It's
we
huge to
are.
say that first.
It's massive.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny. I think all of us would say love matters. Love is important.
Yeah.
But in order for there to be love, there has to be free will. There has to be a chance for people to choose. Like I couldn't hold my wife at gunpoint and say, "Marry me and love me
Yeah.
for the rest of
Love
my
me
life."
or else.
Right? No, it's a choice. So I think God allows us to have that choice, have that ability to choose. And the beauty of the cross is that even when we make a mistake, even when we don't make a right decision, I believe that under the cross it's covered.
Yeah.
It's covered. So I think God in his mercy does allow us to make these choices, make these decisions. But he also, I know, has used this in my life just to refine my belief, what the rest of my life will look like. So I do believe that God takes these things that I think the enemy would use for evil, or that look, on the surface maybe bad or evil or wrong, and he uses them for good, because we're sitting here having this conversation now,
That's right.
right? And it highlights the importance of life. It highlights the importance of relationships. Um, and I think there's always a number of different ways you could go at a situation and look at it. What lens? I'll be vulnerable and say, we my wife and I, we miscarried our first child, and that was
As did we.
a really difficult. That's a really difficult
Yeah.
thing to walk through as a young couple. And then we got pregnant with Cooper, and we had Cooper, and I know I got to have Cooper for 18 years.
Hmm.
Would I have loved for him to outlive me? 1,000%.
Of course.
Would I
Given.
love to have, at 20 to take him to Pebble Beach and play golf together? This spring to be planning where we were going to be playing golf? Absolutely.
Hmm.
And it breaks my heart to not be able to do that. And but I could fixate kind of on that, or I could again be grateful that I got to have him for 18 years. And does it change the fact that there's still, the grieving process that we're working through, and the fact that there's not a 10-minute stretch in a day that I don't think about it. Like it's
Yeah.
But I think I have a choice in terms of, is it gratitude that I'm going to land on, or is it the lack? Abundance or lack? Am I going to focus on what I do have or what I don't have? And I have three amazing, healthy kids, Mia, Carson, and Mackenzie. I have a great wife, great parents, great in-laws, great community. Um, so I think too, like, just to circle back to, the youth as they're processing through their day to day. I think that's a choice that we all have, is what we're going to focus on, and,
Yeah.
and what we focus on multiplies. So if we're comparing, on social media, do I look right, or do I have the right clothes? Am I the right weight?
Which happens every day.
Right? Do I fit into this? Like, as opposed to, like, just, man, what do I have to be thankful for?
Hmm.
And getting good at that, being grateful. And I'm not perfect at it. But this is something I think, if we're going to focus on working on something,
Yeah.
let's work on getting good at being grateful.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could argue with that. So transition then, as a member of faith, you have the situation, you make the choice. Part of your answer was, I'm going to make the choice to believe, and then fast forward, because you're now a dad that is dealing with this, and there's scar tissue there naturally. Um, Other dads are going through what you had to go through. The tiny thing in my head that I was about to say made my lips start to quiver. That, what is one thing you could say to a dad who has gone through this that you think they need to hear inside of this space of them trying to figure out what's going on? Maybe I get lucky enough where the recent tragedy, his father's going to listen to this. What do you say to that person trying to help them heal? What do you say? And as a dad, I think your experience is going to be worth something. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be quiet, let you kind of have that space.
I think one is, you're enough. That you're loved, that you're seen, that your life matters. Right. I think some of these topics, like we're talking about other people, and it's sometimes easy to talk about. Yeah, like my son's life mattered.
Yeah.
Right. And in that context, but I think also we have to look in the mirror too. right? And realize that our life matters, our influence matters. So to not let that beat you up, I think to be able to embrace kind of your value and your worth, and that's a tough one. I mean, especially when you lose a child, because I know for firsthand, like what it felt like to feel like you know I've failed, or what that looks like, to be,
Questions your beliefs.
yeah, to be processing those thoughts. So man, just I think first of all, I'd probably just hug them and just sit there with them. I think
Yeah.
there's and some of the people that did it really well with me in the beginning, we just spent time together. My pastor from Freedom, Wade Haskins, took me to North Carolina. We played Trump National together. We spent a couple days just hanging out. Just getting kind of away from
Yeah.
everything and hanging out. And a couple great buddies they still call, they still text. So I think, find your people. I would encourage you not to withdraw. Because I think initially that's an easy thing to do,
Yeah.
is to pull back, but we need each other. We need people. We need relationship. And again, I go back to the faith aspect. Without the context of knowing that I'm loved, that I'm here on purpose, for a purpose, I think those realities really create the backdrop and the foundation to continue to move forward in life. And that this isn't it, right? That this isn't it, meaning like this moment isn't it, that there's still whatever we have ahead of us.
Yeah.
And to go back to the previous conversation for the youth, whatever, 12 to 22, 15 to 25, this isn't it. Whatever you're in right now, whatever that situation, whatever that moment is that you're struggling with, it feels like this is the end. It's not.
Well,
Right?
that was the next question I was going to ask you,
Okay.
because we kind of talked about what you'd say to a father. It's already happened.
Yeah.
What would you say to a young man who finds themselves having these thoughts? At the time, they may not be self-aware that they're dangerous,
Yeah.
but they're having these thoughts. And I think you kind of just started on that, saying how this isn't it.
Yeah.
This too shall pass. That's a cliche.
I like it.
And how do they get out of that moment of, I'm just going to say despair because it's the quickest thing that comes to mind,
That's
but
a good word.
it might not encompass everything. But when they're in that moment, that critical moment where they feel like they don't have a purpose, and I have to believe in some sense that could be one thing that would be consistent with these young people, although I'll never know, is that they hit a moment where they believe they no longer have a purpose to be, and then it becomes rational to not be anymore.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, what's one thing that you can share with the audience, and maybe a parent who thinks their child might be having these thoughts, not as a parent, but as someone who hears a young person who might be thinking these things? What do you say to those folks in that moment?
Man, yeah, it's a tough one. I think, I would just go back to embrace. Like I'd want to just, kind of just embrace them, hug them, let them know, like, hey,
I'm a hugger, so that's a natural first for me.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
should grab them by their face and be like, man, just you are enough. Like your life has meaning and has value. And I think this phrase of making a permanent decision from a temporary emotion is massive. As we can get in those moments and kind of have these seasons of life, if you will,
Yeah.
that are tough. But just to know that also too, on the other side of tough, that sometimes when it gets the most difficult, you're really close to a breakthrough. That sometimes that in life, those hard seasons are preparing you for a
Oh my
future part,
goodness.
that even that and this is why perspective and context matters massively, and what you believe matters, is that sometimes that the blessing or the season that's coming, this difficult season, is preparing you for that if you were to even step into this now, that you wouldn't have the wherewithal to be able to hold it or handle it properly, that this is actually preparing you for something. So what feels like it is breaking you could be the very thing that's shaping you and making you ready to kind of step into this future season. So I would say talk to someone. I'd say, whether it's your parents, whether it's therapist, counselor, whoever, I would just say talk to someone and just let them know. Have that vulnerable conversation, that you don't have to have it all figured out, that you don't that man, let the comparison narrative kind of fall by the wayside, that
Yeah.
again, you're him. You're her.
You're one of one.
One of one. That's it.
So because we kind of started this idea with faith, I cannot even rationalize all of this without keep coming back to faith, right? And for anybody that knows me, not to put down anybody who is, but I'm not a Bible thumper.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not a consistent churchgoer. I want to go more than I want to.
Yeah.
Lacrosse and Sunday mornings don't go well together.
Yeah.
But that's only a couple months this season. But what comes to mind to me, because as a parent and as a faith bound person, I can see where those things are intertwined. But a lot of families don't have a faith journey like that, which is okay for them.
Yeah.
So help me for a second, kind of zone in on the families or young individuals that haven't made the decision about faith yet. Maybe they're on the fence.
Yeah.
Maybe they have already decided that they don't believe in that higher power or supreme being. And there's no judgment right now, but let's think about those people. They don't have faith or a higher calling or a purpose or even afterlife to lean on. Talk to those people again, because I think it's a difference. Because what you just said a minute ago to me, it is completely wrapped in the idea that there's something after this, even if the after is after death.
Yeah.
You know that you're going to see Coop again.
Yes.
I mean, that kind of got me a little bit.
Yeah.
But that, and that helps you get through. That is a part of your process. That is such a strong thing.
Yes.
Not everybody has that part. And again, no judgment.
No.
If you don't have that part of your life, what do you lean on other than your version of community?
Yeah.
What exists?
Man, I think it is. I think it is community, but I mean, I'd invite them to explore it. To have a conversation. There was a ton of helpful content that Kim and I jumped into right after losing Cooper. And
Okay.
it was all on NDEs, near death experiences. And all of these people that have kind of had these glimpses of the other side, and it's not like religious, not religious. It's just people's experiences.
Yeah.
So I think it's sometimes easy to live in this space. And look, most of the time, people that I've talked to that have something against church or faith, there's some level of hurt there, whether it be because somebody they experienced from church or a church in general.
Direct or indirect.
Yeah. So I always say, like, Jesus said to follow him, not follow church or follow a person. He said him. And when you look at his life, he was perfect. And you see him all throughout scriptures just deal with people in a way that was just loving. It wasn't judgmental. It was in a way that he understood that this person has value. I love them. I'm actually going to give my life for them so that they can be with me. And he'll never force his way into anybody's life, but I think he gently knocks on the door of our heart and says, "Hey, I'm here. If you want to have a conversation, if you want to get to know me, I'm here." But I think to that person that maybe doesn't have a faith, the community just in general, I think is, to me, again, that's one of the factors that helps me believe, is I see the outworking of the community. I see that the love, the people stepping forward and wrapping their arms around our family in this season, that I'm like, well, why? So I would say just lean into that, whether you believe it or not. Like that part, there's something about the relationships and the people coming close and feeling like, man, I'm not alone in this. Which, by the way, a statistic I just recently learned that that loneliness, they're equating it to the equal for your health as smoking cigarettes. Like still, like in this age, we're looking at people like, you still smoke cigarettes, and no judgment. I smoke cigarettes, believe me. So I used to back in the day. So so this idea of loneliness and isolating, and shoot, I'd say that too to like maybe a young person that all of their interaction is just on their phone and maybe showing up with some buddies and just kind of like, man, like, because you could, at least for me, I know some of my struggles, that what it feels like to be in a room full of people and be completely isolated and completely lonely.
That's loneliness.
That's loneliness.
It's not physical location to other people. It's a mind frame or a state of mind.
Yeah. So one of the things that this is something that that Freedom is great at is we love small groups. Is creating small groups, and it's nothing crazy or special in the sense that there's no Bible thumping happening, but this sense of where people can just be real and honest and be like, hey man, I'm really struggling with this, and then inevitably somebody says, yeah, me too.
Me too.
and there's something so powerful in that shared experience where it's like, oh my gosh. I'll tell you, Joe, like, so I mentioned Trent earlier.
Yeah.
So there was a season, so I got diagnosed with Lyme disease in my late 20s, and one of the challenges with that was some anxiety and depression and some other physical stuff.
Because there's chemical changes that happen with Lyme disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had my first panic attack one night, 20 minutes after I fell asleep, woke up, and
How old were you at the time?
27.
Okay. Wow, you're young still. Okay.
27. Yeah. So I didn't know what was going on. So I actually called my buddies, throughout the next like week or so, like, hey, you ever dealt with it? Everybody was like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man. So it was actually probably like 6 months of like just like every night. I got like to the point where I was just afraid of the fear because anticipating bedtime, I'm like, is this going to happen again?
Oh my gosh.
So it actually wasn't until, and I don't know why it took this long to connect with Trent on it, but I talked to Trent one day and I said, hey man, he's like, yeah, absolutely. He's like, yeah, when I was in college, I had something very similar to that. And it didn't fix it immediately, but there was just like a weight that fell off when it was like that me too, like, oh my gosh, I'm going through that also.
Yeah.
So I think, if you can put yourself in those situations, whether it's a support group, community,
Yeah.
some way, but I think the hardest part sometimes is getting over the fear of
Oh
like
my gosh.
stepping into community or stepping into vulnerability. But I think if this encourages anybody just to feel that sense of safety to say it's okay, like you can step into those conversations, and the benefit is massive. It's not something either that you can buy on Amazon or at Target.
Yeah.
It's special.
And I think a lot of what holds people back from joining these communities is that is a version of acceptance that the reality exists. Because you can't join a community of surviving family members of suicide unless you cope with the fact that you lost somebody.
Mhm.
Right. And I think that's a big hump of fear to get over.
Yeah.
However, when you come over top that mountain, that's where the green grass is.
Yeah.
Um,
That's good.
Not that the grass is always greener. That's not a life lesson that I just tried to teach. But in a sense, though, you have to see the pasture on the other side of the mountain, and it's a tough thing to get above. So let me ask you this: do you feel like your community and your church? Um, do you feel like you could have gotten over that hump without them? I think that's so important, right? I never asked you that question, but I knew what the answer was. So we have someone with experience personally in the situation telling you to get over that hump by joining a community. If you're a part of a community, involving yourself and engaging, and that community is self-defined. It can be a church, it can be a school, a PTA, it could be a group of 3 or 4 friends, guys or gals, or it can be your family too.
Yeah.
But that community is such an important part. And I bring that up because I also read in my light research that embarrassment is a part of the process afterwards. And it's a horrible thing on top of all the horrible things dealing with, the layer on embarrassment that now you have some sort of scarlet letter.
Yeah.
And did you experience any of that initially? Like,
100.
because not everybody can say, I don't care what everybody else thinks.
Yeah.
We are aware of it.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, even coming here today, like I'm thinking, like, am I literally going to talk about this today? But again, I think that's what we believe and what we come into agree with matters. So
Yeah.
kind of have to coach yourself through that a little bit, and again, I think be your own advocate. I think in my line of work helps a little bit. So I kind of I've tried over the years to get good at thinking about my thinking and try to understand like where I'm
Yeah.
going, like almost like to where treat your thoughts kind of like the like when you go to the airport and they kind of pat you down and it's like where you're coming from, where you're
TSA.
going. Yeah, TSA, like pull a little TSA with your thinking and pat it down. Like where's this thought coming from? Where is it going? But no, that's a huge one because I think
Yeah.
especially with a child, like I mean I felt you still battle with that stuff, man. Like still feel like a failure, but to know that like you can't stop there. You
Yeah.
can't let that be
Paralyzed.
be the kind of the cul-de-sac of your thinking, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so you've been so gracious to hit topics that are tough. I want to channel your inner strength one more time. Okay.
Yeah.
Something I also stumbled upon when I was researching, before I speak to you and some other guests I'm going to have on later, is the effect of a tragedy like this on a marriage. Um, and I'm sure that everything we've talked about directly laces in between faith and your own mental journey, your background, your community, the village you spoke of. But let's take a little second and focus on the marriage itself after this tragedy happens. What can you share with the audience who might never experience this of how important it is as a community supports the marriage too?
Yeah, that's massive. And yeah, I think marriage in general is, let's say, under attack in our society, in the sense that,
I agree.
over half, don't make it. And again,
I think it's actually, I think the number has risen to 60%.
is it 60? Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. But
Yeah,
it,
post COVID.
and it's no judgment. It's no judgment.
Yeah,
Everybody has a story. Every relationship has a story. Um, but for me, I was actually, Kimmy and I got married young. She's my high school sweetheart. We both went to Bel Air High School, and I remember one day specifically driving up 23, just feeling like, you know what, she's my greatest chance for happiness, in the sense of,
mm,
I don't want to restart. And again, there's no judgment, and I know everybody has their own story, but for me, the D word was kind of off the table. It was
I agree.
something that from the beginning, that we just kind of wanted to shut the door on, and that
If I could stop you real quick, was that always your philosophy um, as your marriage was formed and worked on, or was it something you had to reinforce after the tragedy?
yeah, no, I think
Did you already have
I
that
think we
belief?
kind of, yeah, we had that belief,
Okay.
but I think it's something that we've had to lean back on. And not that there's been moments where, like, throw the towel in, but I think when things get difficult, like walking through a tragedy like this, it's hard, in that your capacity is extremely limited, especially those days and months right after. And shoot, we
Mm,
haven't even been a full year yet, so we're still in the middle of it. But our mornings together, our time together, we found a way, I think, to make it so that we could really support each other. So unfortunately, I think moments where, man, marriage gets difficult, the commitment really has to be revisited, in terms of, like, are we in this together? And I actually want to say this back to, again, the 12 to 22, 15 to 25-year olds. If you're not happy by yourself, you're not going to be happy in a relationship.
oh my gosh, that is gold.
You
I
know,
agree.
so I think we put so much weight sometimes on the relationship, that's something that we want, but we unintentionally crush what we
Yeah,
really want. So Kimmy and I have taken this approach that it's a 100-100 type of deal. Like, if I don't have 100, well, hopefully she's showing up with 100, and if she's not 100, then I have to show up with my 100. But really being able to lean on each other in this season has been massive. And we have three other kids that are a blessing, that we want to be there for. And I'd
and they
say,
need you.
yeah, they do. They need us, and we want to be there for them. And it's a day at a time thing. But I think, look, you have to prioritize something. Things don't grow and get better and stay strong by accident. There's a level of intentionality that has to be there. Um, but I would say also that that relationship, for me, has helped reveal me, right? Like,
Oh
there,
wow.
in a way where it's, I don't think a marriage is like, hey, let me see how much joy I can get out of this. Like, don't get it wrong. There is a sense of where there is a real sense of joy and fulfillment and
Yeah.
happiness that comes from it. But it's also, I think, one of God's greatest gifts for growth, in that it reveals my heart in a lot of ways too. Like, when I know I'm trying to show up and serve, well, gosh, it reveals some things in me where I'm like, wow, like, you can be kind of selfish, bud. Why don't you just get up and stop worrying about what somebody else did, and go show up, go serve, go add value. Um, it's a massive thing to have somebody in your corner that is there for you, and that there's that commitment. And again, that goes back to my faith piece. I believe that,
Yeah.
in Greek, there's
Intertwined in everything.
it is. And it's funny, in our language we use the word love, but in Greek there's several words that
Different kinds of them.
yes.
Yep.
So agape, this commitment love that isn't tied. There's no circumstance. So we actually entered marriage knowing that this was a commitment. That this was not something that was going to be based on, well, I kind of fell out of love, or Like, no,
Yeah.
you don't really fall in or out of love. It's a commitment, and we look at it that way. And I'm so thankful to, I feel like in a way I kind of, hit the lottery because one, I didn't even know she could cook. I didn't know any of these things when, she was 19, I was 21.
You haven't learned those things at all at 19.
Yeah, but one of the things I think we did do well was we kind of had a framework. We did some premarital counseling through a church I grew up in Timonium, and some of that was a great foundation. But I'd say this too, and I want to thank my parents and her parents that they've really showed us too what it looks like to have a committed relationship and love each other well and serve each other. So, um, and that's something that we want to pass on to our kids to be able to create that stability and that sense of consistency and what love looks like.
And I was going to actually say, in so many words, what you just said is that your children are learning the power of love through your eyes, right? And your relationship with your faith,
Hmm.
with yourself, allows you to be a good partner, and they're learning that too. And I know that your other three children are going to be stronger because of how you and Kim are.
So,
And again, in the space, we're talking about both sides of the coins, right? There are marriages that are themselves not as foundationally sound as they should be. And something like this can, and ultimately, based on research, has quite often resulted in the D word, the
hmm
divorce.
hmm
Um, but again, just talking about it in this space where nobody wants to put themselves in a mind frame of what you had to go through. But looking back at a playbook, it appears that your marriage was a huge part of your positive grief journey to where you are today, which, like you said, and I mentioned it seems like years ago, but it's not that long ago.
yeah.
And it's something we should talk about and then celebrate for those that have it and then encourage those that don't. Is that as a parent, that foundation is going to be important sometimes when you least expect it. And in this moment, you fortunately, in addition to your faith, had this committed partner,
Mhm.
the other one. And I love 100 out of 100 because 50-50 is a whole different mindset because that means the best you can achieve is 100.
Mhm.
When you both bring 100%, it's not 100, it's 200.
Mhm.
I love that, Christian. That's badass,
Yeah.
shall we say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you've had a lot of life lessons that came way before the reason you and I are sitting here. And you obviously have a living. I'd like for you to share in a moment, lighten the mood a little bit
Yeah.
into what you do for a living. And there's going to be a lot of overlap in what you do because I know ahead of time.
Yeah.
But why don't you share with the audience what you do so that I can help kind of connect everything
Yeah.
after you do so?
Yeah. So my company is called Canary Consulting. I specialize in leadership development, one-on-one coaching. I actually worked for a great company, Chick-fil-A, for 10 years. And, one of the things that I saw was that the culture, that the environment of a workplace really does impact the results,
Mm,
right? The days when we had things really, really healthy, positive, and optimistic, man, the drive-through seemed to work better. So I also realized that, man, on the other side of my leadership, that really kind of dictates what it looks like and feels like to be in the room, to be in the restaurant. So one of the things that I kind of set out to do was to try to really eliminate those hidden dangers
mm.
that plague organizations. That's where kind of the canary in the coal mine comes from. Is
I was going
kind
to
of,
ask you to share that. That's good.
yeah. So like just to be able to kind of get into and reveal and see those hidden dangers, and really a lot of it comes back to limiting beliefs because I believe leaders, if they knew the difference that they could make, they would step into it. Nobody shows up to work and nobody gets up and says, "Let me just go have a terrible day today. Let me go, you know, wreck somebody's day and let me just get mediocre results." But I think when leaders start to understand their value, who they are, their worth, and again I used that term earlier, selling people on their value.
Yeah.
There's a handful of assessments that I love to use. Again, everybody's 1 in 8 billion. I think you can use those assessments at least to spark the curiosity of what's inside someone. And but no two people are the same. So every situation may be a little bit of a framework,
Yeah.
but it's tailored. It's a tailored process. And I love working with companies that love to invest in their team, that say, hey, these are people that I want to invest in. I think it was Richard Branson or somebody was saying, what happens if we invest in them and they leave? Well, somebody said, well, what happens if you invest in them and they, or don't invest in them and they stay? Right. So this idea of like, you gotta,
Go figure.
yeah. And I think it actually was Richard Branson that said, if you take care of your employees will take care of the customer. So many times, companies are overlooking their employee and just focusing on the customer when,
Yeah.
if
Just skipping a step.
yeah, as a leader, if we just started to focus on our team and love them well and invest in them, they would take care of the rest.
Brian Billick actually talked about that on a Ravens podcast at one point. And he was saying, he was asked the question of, is it frustrating sometimes as an owner when you draft these players who, can for all intents and purposes seem like, gems, diamonds in the rough. You find them and then you groom them and then they leave. And he had a really cool response. And he said, look, there's a reality in our business. You can't keep everybody. It's impossible. So once you're in that space, you have to know some are going to leave. He said, but the organization itself is known to be a culture and a birthplace of these amazing individuals with a pedigree, with their Baltimore Ravens name on it. And they're proud if someone leaves. They try to keep them, but if they can't, they're proud when someone goes and has an amazing career because they were tied during the developmental part of their careers to the Ravens. And if you look past, 1997, 97, right? 96, 97? Oh, I'm a bad Ravens fan. To now, this organization is known for developing players. And it adds to veteran players accepting contracts and all that. And not to digress, but I fully buy into that concept, and it's a shame that people don't know that enough. They're not told that enough,
Yes.
right? It's a shame.
Yes.
But I've always, learned too that it's so easy to see how a bad day can get worse and a bad employee can make things worse or other people think bad. But the moment you accept that, there's an undeniable reality that that coin can flip. And a good person or a good leader or a good employee can project the same contrary positivity in a room, in an office, in a company to its employees. And I love that that's what you focus on is how do we make that person shine and then that metaphorical light will spread. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And it's tough to do what you do.
Yeah, it's funny. I see a lot of companies make the mistake of kind of promoting their best workers, their best employees, and they may not be the best people person. So, like a leadership position and the job are often two different things. So, a lot of times there isn't the skill, the support for the skill sets needed to go from a great uh, team player to a leadership position. So that jump oftentimes it sometimes can result in micromanagement where they get into that leadership position and then it's like, well, now do it like me. So it's a whole different thing to have that leadership position and be able to then come alongside people and support and grow them. So that's the part that I think is fun. And I actually heard this recently that people's mental health is actually impacted more by their manager than their doctor. It's like, wow, that's a really that's a weighty thing to realize that like somebody
that's profound,
right? I mean, it's a big
but believable.
Yeah,
I don't question that at all. It's logically sound.
Yeah, I mean, some of the very things that I teach and I love and I'm passionate about is because of some of the bad leaders in my life that I've been on the receiving side of bad leadership, and man, it affects everything. It affects how you feel when you go home and what Sunday night feels like going into Monday morning, like all those things.
And then don't forget too that when you add the hours up, take away sleep, you are with people at work more times than more in the day, which adds up, even with the weekends factored in, than your family. So it is a second family. So that influence on your mental health is just as prevalent as the people that are already on your side at home.
100%.
So how long have you been in business?
So I started in early 21.
Okay.
Yeah, early.
That was a crazy time back then.
It was. Yeah.
The C word was going around.
Oh yeah, we just finished kind of changing the operations and getting everything situated, and then I just found this passion with working with Chick-fil-A operators and helping coach their teams up. I did 12 grand openings with Chick-fil-A, so I love this training aspect. I love working with people that were coachable, teachable, that were wanting to get better and grow. That to me is probably one of the most fulfilling things, and I think impactful for them too. Is a lot of times people don't have somebody necessarily pouring into them and taking time. And look, I don't think there's any magic wand that I have, but I think sometimes when you block out an
Yeah.
hour a week to really invest in yourself and again get good at your thinking, like think about your thinking, and it's like, well, who told you that? Who told you that you can't do that, or who told you
Mm,
that you have to be that way? And we start start to break through those limiting beliefs and those barriers, and
magic happens.
magic happens.
So the purpose of today's podcast was obviously due to a loss in the community, and your impact today has been tremendous. But I do want to help support your business and you and your family. So tell us who a good customer is for your business.
Yeah. So I build the people that build your business. So if you're in the people business, so there's people that you work with, and you're in the customer experience business in any way, I believe that we can work together. The owners, I think I found that I have the most synergy with are those that are happy to invest in their people and can't do it themselves. Because let's be honest, CEOs, CFOs, they have their job. They're
Yeah.
trying to do something. Then all of a sudden there's this gap of development that can build in an organization. So finding people that love to invest in their people and that maybe just don't have the time to do it, I'd be happy to come alongside and help.
Awesome. Two more questions before I let you go, because I know you have a career and a family to get back to. But I'm going to thank you for the 100th time for coming today. So we heard about who your customer is, again, for your business. Who is another business or industry that is a good connection for you to help expose you to potential customers?
It's a great question. Again, I think anything in the service industry, anybody on the other
Okay.
side of people
Which is broad, but
serving
it's great.
people. Yeah, I mean, I think hospitality is something. I think that this really matters. I know I've heard it a million times since COVID. Is man, it really seems like customer service has gone down. But again, I don't believe that any of these people coming to work get up and say, "Man, I want to go give some really terrible service." Right? And I think it is sometimes just a matter of somebody believing in them and
Yeah.
coming alongside of them and helping again sell them on their worth and sell them on their value and the difference they could make in their job. And again, there's no magic wand, but it's something that I love to do, and I've seen results from it.
I love that. Okay, last question, and this is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Different radio shows or communities, they have fun little things they ask about: bar of soap, boxers or briefs.
Yeah.
Soap versus what shower gel, I guess is it? I'm
Yeah.
a soap guy. Sorry. So my question is, what is your superpower? Now I know a lot of Marvel movies have been around the last 15 years. I'm a huge nerd and fan. And not everyone has experienced their origin story. I kind of hinted at that earlier in our conversation.
Mhm.
So some people don't know, but I got a feeling that you do know what yours is. So what is your superpower?
Yeah, my superpower is empathy.
Mm,
Is empathy. That's I developed what I call the empathy leadership model. So it's one of these. I believe empathy is the X factor or the force multiplier to leadership coaching.
power word, force multiplier.
Power word. But it was actually through the Clifton Strength Finders that I was actually digging through this word. And why is this word keep coming up? And actually, I had a business consultant ask. He said, "Well, how have you done what you've done at Chick-fil-A?" And this word empathy kept coming up. So I developed what I call the empathy leadership model.
Mm,
Oddly enough, I took Clifton Strength Finders, and my top strength was empathy. And then I actually connected the dots back to
go
why I
figure.
did terrible at school. Was I was always busy noticing and feeling the room and understanding things that I shouldn't have been thinking about, daydreaming. But now, as I've gotten older, I realize there's something to it. So
That's awesome. So Christian Honig, your superpower is empathy, and I can see it, and that is pretty amazing. Um, Thank you so much for coming here today. We started off with our goal, and I'm going to repeat it. If there is one person in our community, and we define that community as broad as its sense as it needs to be, can benefit, whether you're a parent who just wants to have a tough conversation with your family or your children, whether you're a sibling, or whether you are a young person yourself that hears this and says, maybe I should talk to somebody because I've got some things going on up there that's, I'm not really happy about. I think there's a huge space for that, and we hope that this reaches you. Anybody that comes on my show, I say you are now connected to the web. Two B's, of course. So thank you for being connected. The World Wide Web of Lending and connected to the web. Appreciate your time today. Again, a little bit of a longer podcast, but I want to make sure that I give this gentleman and his wonderful experience and message a voice. So thank you guys. I'll see you back for more. Hope to see you soon.